these meetings. We appreciate Doug Smith and all of his staff, Austin Corey, Travis Hare, Draper Carlisle, and John Woodard is our legal counsel. We'd like to welcome him. I'd like to begin then and hear item number 1.
Okay. Commissioner, just remember when you talk, turn your button on. If the red light's not on, then we can't pick up your voice. Also, downstairs, there's another room just below us that has a TV that will be streaming this about 30 seconds later than what we are now. But if people need to sit down there, they can go downstairs. It's also televised out in the foyer here. Tonight we have the conditional use for Heber Light Power and Rocky Mountain Power on the agenda. And my thought is that I was going to go through briefly the alignment proposal, some things about conditional uses, and some of the history, and then turn it over to the applicant, because since this is a conditional use, they will have to satisfy the Planning Commission with the information that you need to make a good decision and show how they've addressed the impacts to your satisfaction. So if you remember, well, I'll go through this quickly. The related applications on this is that there was a previous conditional use permit approved for the alignment of the power lines that are along Highway 40 several years ago. This proposal runs through 4 different zones: the A20, the RA1, the RA5, and the North Village Overlay Zone. The proposal is a power line, right-of-way, transmission lines, and substation, a new substation. And as I mentioned, this is a conditional use that's only reviewed by the Planning Commission, so this doesn't get forward to the council. They will not act on this. The decision that's made tonight, if you choose to make a decision, is final unless appealed to district court or Board of Adjustment, sorry. The request is for 4 miles of rebuilt existing line, 2.1 miles of new line, 10 acres for a new substation. And the site for that substation is approximately 1465 west and 650 south. And then addition of equipment to the Midway substation within the existing fenced-in boundary. Are you guys picking this up on your screens? Back on December 14th of 2017, this item was before the Planning Commission for the same proposal as a conditional use again. And the motion at that time was by Commissioner Hendricks, who I hope is on his way, was to continue item number 8, the application for conditional use by Rocky Mountain Power and Heber Light Power, and invite them to address as many of the concerns as they can. Those include the intent of the Wasatch County mission, the valley character, how they are addressing the conditional use permit items, routing, is the line adequate both for the current and future, rough costs of overhead and bearing, plans for involving other jurisdictions if there are other entities involved with this area, and addressing the question of easement and right-of-way. That was to be scheduled for February. It's never done, but there's a number of things that have happened in that time frame between December 14th and now. So let me go through a few of those things. The Heber Light Power Board added 4 new elected officials and created a facility committee that re-verified the need to update engineering studies. The board studied the cost of installing underground lines and determined that the cost is 4 times the cost of going above ground. Facility Committee board went over every segment of the line in an attempt to mitigate aesthetic impacts. The board voted at great expense to remove the distribution lines from the poles and put them underground. This allows for greater separation between poles and fewer lines on the poles. In December of 2018, the board voted to approve the overhead line routing with changes made by the Facility Committee. The vote passed. And for your information and the information of the audience, the Heber Light Power Board is made up of the Heber City Mayor, the Midway City Mayor, the Charleston City Mayor, Heber City Council Member, 2 Heber City Council Members, and a Wasatch County Council Member. So let me go through conditional uses, and I think the Planning Commission is versed on this, but for their understanding as well as the audience, that this is straight from the code 162301. It says, although each zone attempts to identify permitted land uses that are generally compatible with each other and to assign compatible land uses to specific zoning districts, there are land uses that are more intensive and produce special impacts which can be made compatible only through conditional regulation. If properly and carefully planned, those conditional uses may become compatible and appropriate. This paragraph is out of the staff report, and it says the proposal crosses through several zones, including the North Village Overlay Zone, A20, RA5, and RA1 zones. Each of these zones lists power lines over 49 feet as a conditional use. When the County Council adopted the ordinance allowing up to 49-foot overhead power lines as a permitted, power lines over 49 feet as a permitted use, presumably, County Council anticipated that the impacts of power lines over 49 feet could be mitigated through conditions that would be applied to the conditional use process. There are a number of property owners adjacent to the proposal, as well as county residents and visitors in general, that will be affected by this proposal. Mitigating conditions should be carefully considered. So this is the section of our code regarding conditional uses, and there are items that need to be determined by the Planning Commission and satisfied by the applicant. Let me just go through these real briefly. The applicant complies with all requirements of this title. Business shall maintain a business license if required. The use will be compatible with surrounding structures of use, location, scale, mass, design, and circulation. The visual or safety impacts caused by the proposed use can be adequately mitigated with conditions. The use is consistent with the Wasatch County General Plan. The effects of any future expansion in use or scale can be and will be mitigated through conditions. All issues of lighting, parking, and location and nature of the proposed use, the character of the surrounding development, traffic capacities of adjacent and collector streets, the environmental factors such as drainage, erosion, soil stability, wildlife impacts, dust, odor, noise, and vibrations have been adequately mitigated through conditions. The use will not place an unreasonable financial burden on the county or place significant impacts on the county or surrounding properties without adequate mitigation of these impacts. The use will not adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the residents and visitors of Wasatch County. And finally, any land use requiring a building permit shall conform to the International Uniform Building Standards. This is the Utah State Code regarding conditional uses. And it says the county may adopt a land use ordinance that includes conditional uses and provisions for conditional uses that require compliance with standards set forth in an applicable ordinance. The county may not impose a requirement or standard on a conditional use that conflicts with the provision of this chapter or other state or federal law. The land use authority shall approve a conditional use if reasonable conditions are proposed or can be imposed so to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use in accordance with applicable standards. The requirement described in subsection 2AI to reasonably mitigate anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed conditional use does not require elimination of the detrimental effects. If the land use authority proposes reasonable conditions on a proposed conditional use, the land use authority shall ensure that the conditions are stated on the record and reasonably relate to mitigating the anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. If the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of a proposed conditional use cannot be substantially mitigated by the proposal or the imposition of reasonable conditions to achieve compliance with applicable standards, the land use authority may deny the conditional use. The land use authority's decision to approve or deny a conditional use is an administrative land use decision. The legislative body shall classify any use that is a land use regulation allows in a zoning district as either a permitted or conditional use under this chapter. So in essence, a conditional use is a use that is allowed but may require conditions to mitigate negative impacts. This is the overall map of what is proposed tonight. And we'll go through each segment briefly because I anticipate that the applicant will go through each segment again. But I thought this map was very telling of what we're talking about and where things are. So you can see up on the north or the right-hand corner of the map, we've got the section that starts on Highway 40 south of the Jordan L Dam and runs to the north access to the college. It's where the college substation is. And I'll go through each one of these as I said. So here's a blow-up of that segment. It's 1.6 miles. Here you can see, looking north along Old Highway 40, there are two lines running parallel to each other. The left is the transmission line, the right is the distribution line. This proposal will combine both lines into one line. This is looking southwest from Highway 32 towards Highway 40. So this will be a place that will have lines that will run there towards that intersection. This is a new segment that will run to the college substation section. So then moving to section 2, the gap between where the green line stops on the upper right corner is the existing lines that were approved years ago and that run to the south portion of Highway 40. So here's a blow-up of that section. There's a gap between Highway 40, as you can see, that is Heber City. So that will have to go through their process for approval. This is the last pole that you can see on Highway 40. It's a giant pole because it's the terminal pole where the new segment will run west. And as I said, this will run through Heber City until it gets into the county, which is what we're approving tonight. That arrow you can see is to show, it doesn't show up real well, but on all those lines heading north, the distribution line is on the bottom of those lines. And you can't tell very well, but it's a galvanized crossbar that holds those distribution lines. And what I was hoping to point out is that these lines will not have the distribution. Those will be buried in most locations. If the distribution line is not buried, then one of our conditions is that those cross arms be rusted steel like you see there on this closest pole. So once the line goes west and outside of Heber's boundary, then it's going to follow the A route of the proposed bypass. Now, there are 3 bypass potential alignments. I suspect the A route most likely will not be the route that ends up happening. I could be wrong, but as we go through the Army Corps review of wetlands and delineation, obviously we would go in the location where there is the fewest wetland impacts. So it will follow a section line down to Highway 113 at Southfield Road. What I really wanted to avoid in this area, this is a rendering that we did, my department did. It shows 2 steel poles close to Highway 113 that we do not want to have happen. So the hope is, and they'll show this as part of their presentation, that the wood poles are set back further and that they're not the metal poles, so there's a smaller diameter wood poles. You can see on the on the bottom slide. The top one is the existing view looking east on 113, and the bottom one is the view when the new line comes through. So moving on to segment, we'll go to the substation. So the substation proposal is at 650 South, 1465 West. It's the Riley Probst property that was purchased, and it's an RA5 zone. Substation is proposed there in the yellow. This is the view of 650 South now, looking west. Go back. The purple alignment you can see on the map gets removed. That line comes out, and the new line goes to 113 towards Midway. There will be portions of this where they're proposing to have the distribution line above grade, so it will be mounted on the poles. Sorry, I'm backtracking again. So this is the substation. So the substation, as I said, is located in that yellow portion there. You can see the LDS Church on the right and Southfield Road in front of that. And you can see the dotted line between the church and the substation location that is the future bypass alignment. So it's 10 acres they're proposing on that south portion of the property. We anticipate that it will be precast concrete walls similar to this that's shown on an existing substation in town, except I believe these walls are 8 feet tall, and I believe they're proposing 10-foot tall walls. Moving on to segment 4.
Doug, what was that purple?
That was a line that's existing but will be removed.
The kind of inverted U?
Yeah. Existing line that comes out. So the gap between 113 and where the green line is Midway City. So this proposal would be to upgrade the existing lines going into the substation up by the Midway Cemetery. This is the existing lines on Ward's Lane looking west, and I think the county boundary is about where that asphalt gets much narrower. Substation, so Rocky Mountain Power Substation is on the right there. They're kind of the rectangular looking piece. My understanding is that they have the room to put additional equipment within that fenced in area without expanding that. And that's a view of the site currently. We did receive several objection letters that were sent to the Planning Commission earlier. I suspect the people that wrote those letters are here and will most likely want to go over those if that's acceptable to the Planning Commission. But I've included them in the PowerPoint as well. And if you want me to, I'm happy to go through each one of them, but I suspect they'll want to go through that as well. This is a letter from Bain, did I pronounce that right? Johnson, President of Volt, you also received. This is the DRC sign-off. As you can imagine from people like the Health Department, Public Works, and Engineering, there weren't any issues with this, so there's nothing that showed up in the DRC report. And for the audience, the DRC is the Development Review Committee. Key points to consider. The proposal is a conditional use, and impacts of the use should, if possible, be mitigated with conditions. The proposal has been approved by the Eagle Light Power Board, which is made up of elected officials. The Heber Light Power Board recommended that the distribution lines in specific areas be buried, allowing for the potential of lower pole height and/or greater spans between poles. The applicant has the burden of providing the information necessary for the Planning Commission to understand the request and any proposed mitigations to make an informed decision to satisfy the requirements of the conditional use code. Due to the preliminary nature of the proposal, meaning the engineering has not been completed, exact heights and materials of the poles in each specific location have not been determined. However, as mentioned, the Planning Commission needs to have enough information to be able to understand the impacts of the proposal. So we have heights in all those segments within the range with a maximum height and most likely a minimum height, and it will be similar in that area. And lastly, the item was heard and continued on December of 2017 with a list of items that needed to be satisfied. So these are mitigating proposals from the applicant. Number one, we're proposing non-speculative wire, which is less reflective. Number two, wood poles where feasible and rusted metal poles only where design requires. Number three, removal of distribution lines in all areas that are critical as far as aesthetics, which allows fewer lines on poles and fewer poles due to larger spans, which also removes the distribution cross arm. And the removal of those lines means that they're buried. These are our proposed conditions. The Planning Commission should consider which of the following is more appropriate. A, the applicant should keep the heights of the power poles as low as possible. This may require more poles in order to keep the power lines at a minimum required separation from the ground. So as those lines, Nick can explain this better than I can, but as those lines sag in between the poles, they have to have a minimum separation between the ground and the pole. Or B, the applicant should install the fewest number of poles as possible. This may require heights at the high end of the requested range in more places, but would result in an overall lower number of poles. The applicant should not go higher than necessary to meet safety and code requirements. Second condition, the applicant must demonstrate that the proposal can satisfy the necessary findings outlined in 162307, and with mitigating conditions can be acceptable use. Number three, distribution lines for the more noticeable parts of the system must be buried. A clear commitment by the applicant for specific areas and lengths should be determined. Number four, demonstration and clear understanding of the Highway 113 crossing at Southfield Road with particular attention to setbacks from the highway for poles and consideration of wood poles and not large metal terminus poles. Number five, all poles through straight portions should be wood with corner poles only being rusted steel. Number six, the maximum height limit for power poles is 110 feet on corner and in poles and 90 feet on all other poles. Remember I said there was the range in there, so the range would be lower than the 110 and 90. Number seven, the lines should be non-spectral or low reflective lines to reduce visual impact. Number eight, all horizontal bars, including distribution lines where used, shall be rusted and not galvanized. Number nine, in all areas where tube lines exist, Rocky Mountain Power and Heber Light Power shall co-locate lines. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Doug.
Questions?
Any questions from the commission?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. With the applicant, any rest of the commission? Yeah, like, there you go.